The United States picks its president with the Electoral College, 538 votes distributed by population, mostly to the 50 states and D.C. To become a president, you need to win a majority of those votes. But 538 is an even number, so what happens when the race for president is tied? Don't worry, there's an 18th century solution to the problem. If the Electoral College is tied, the House of Representatives breaks that tie. As the name implies, the House is filled with representatives from each of the states. The more people in a state, the more representatives it has, and there are 435 in total. Thankfully, an odd number and a guaranteed tiebreaker. Except, there's a catch. Each representative doesn't get one vote, it's each state that gets one vote. So Florida's 27 representatives have to decide amongst themselves who to support before casting Florida's one vote to help break the tie. Meanwhile, thinly populated Alaska's sole representative has only to consult himself before casting Alaska's vote. This is an incredibly disproportionate system because just 10 states, California, Texas, New York, Florida, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Georgia, and North Carolina, contain more than half the population of the United States but get only 20% of the votes if the race for president is tied, and the other 40 states with less than half the population get 80% of the votes. While an exact tie is unlikely, this system is also used if there are more than 2 candidates for president and none of them gets a majority in the Electoral College, which is exactly what happened when 4 candidates ran for president in 1824. Andrew Jackson got the most votes from Americans and the most votes in the Electoral College, but not a majority, so the race was turned over to the House of Representatives voting as states, who picked John Quincy Adams instead. In a modern America with more states, a 3-way race can have horrifically disproportionate results. Consider a third-party candidate who loves the small states and who the small states love in return. He gets the fewest Electoral College votes, but enough to ensure that neither of the 2 more popular candidates gets a majority, so now the House decides the winner. And those 26 smallest states, representing just 17% of the population, can pick their man as president, even though 83% of Americans didn't vote for him. It's unlikely, but it really shouldn't even be possible. Anyway, all this talk of presidents has left the vice president unmentioned. A reasonable person might assume that he just comes along with the president, but no. When there's a tie, the Senate independently picks the vice president, so the United States could end up with a president from one party and a vice president from the other, which might make for some very uncomfortable meetings. But even this crazy system for resolving a tie isn't guaranteed to work because there are 100 members of the Senate, and in the House of Representatives they're forced to vote as 50 states, and many of those states have 10 or 8 representatives, making the whole system tie-tacular with all those even numbers. So if the House can't pick the president, but the Senate has picked the vice president, then the vice president becomes acting president until the House can make up its mind. But if neither the House can pick the president nor the Senate can pick the vice president, then the Speaker of the House becomes acting president until either branch of Congress picks someone. And that's how the United States would resolve a tied race for president, though it might be faster and more fair to just flip a coin. Of course, you could get rid of the Electoral College and thus this whole crazy system and instead have a national popular vote, perhaps with something fancy like preferential voting, but maybe that's just a crazy idea.